Hi, mi gente. This is Café con Cultura. I'm your host, Magdalena Cortez, and this is.
Rocio Cortez. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And today's topic is going to be a really good one, I believe. We spent quite some time kind of reviewing it, talking about it. But before we even get to into that topic at all, we really just want to start off just by saying that we really appreciate everybody's support up until now, right? We hope that you guys are loving the episodes. And yes, we do have an introduction video. So if you guys are curious on knowing a little bit more about our story and knowing why it is that we decided to uh, create a podcast to begin with, please do go and check that out. But in other words, what we're trying to do here is we want to grow our network, right? We want to get to know our community a little bit more. We want to hear from you guys. Yes, Magdalena and I do have our own experiences. We have our own our careers, our stories, everything that we want to talk to you guys about. But we also want to hear from you guys, right? We want to hear from our gente. We want to be able to get to know you guys a little bit more and see if you guys are relating to our topic. See if you guys have any stories at all, right? I would love to have a couple of you guys on here on the podcast with us. Join us one of these days as well. And we just want to make sure that we grow our community and get to know you guys a little bit more. So definitely go and check that out if you haven't. But other than that, we'll go ahead and jump into today's topic.
Okay, let's dive into the topic now. Uh, we're going to talk about how in our generation we can feel like we're not Latin enough for our community. Like me, I don't know much Spanish. I do understand it, but I think I have a heavy tongue, so I can't really speak it as much. So I'm always being called no sabo just because I don't speak that much Spanish. But I do understand, though. That's mainly what I tell everyone. I understand what you're saying, but you gotta give me a moment because I gotta prepare my mouth, you know? I gotta prepare it. Do you ever
Yeah.
have any struggles about it, Rocio?
Not about speaking Spanish, but it's because me and you had a very different upbringing in the terms
Oh
of
yeah.
our language, right? When I was little, we were only allowed to speak, well, I mean, up until I moved out, honestly, in our house, we were only allowed to speak Spanish. If we were caught speaking English, that was the chancla right there, right? That was anything that was around right there at the second. And we weren't allowed to listen to English music. We weren't allowed to see the TV in English. We were not allowed to bring English inside our house. And our dad's perspective was, you get that outside of the house, right? You go to school, you have that there. I want to make sure you guys don't lose it. So in my house, it's only Spanish. So literally, even in the trucks, whenever my dad would go onto my mom's car or anything like that, we had to make sure we changed the radio. Obviously, we always snuck in our English, right? We wanted to listen to our own music too, and we did it behind my dad's back, honestly. So we would have to make sure that the radio was changed, that there was no English music, that it wasn't an English station, because then it was a conversation of, why are you guys listening to that trash, right? You guys have to listen to pure Spanish because I don't want you guys to lose that. And then when you guys came around, my dad was a little bit more inclined to start changing a lot. When like I said, when I was growing up, my dad he only wore huaraches, work boots, or boots, like Mexican boots, right? De cocodrilo, whatever it is that you wanna call it, right? But then, even just a little bit more of a change later when you guys were growing up, he started wearing tennis shoes, and that had never happened for us, right? He started to let you guys speak a little bit more English than he did with us. With us specifically, we weren't allowed to have a conversation with him in English either. I mean, nothing English whatsoever. It was just Spanish all along. But definitely that was a big difference right there. But in terms of, what our conversation is going to be about, it's going to be about not being Latina enough, right? We hear that a lot in our community. We hear a lot of people say that. And it's something that really, in before, I would say that I didn't have any type of experience on it. I grew up very, very Latina. I grew up in a neighborhood where it wasn't one of those things where it was questioned whether or not I was Latina. If you grew up in my neighborhood, you were more than likely Latina. It was very, very odd for you not to be Latina, whether that was Mexican, whether that was Guatemalan, whether that was Salvadorian, or we had a couple Puerto Ricans too. Very, very little, but anything Hispanic, anything Latina, right? It's where we grew up. We grew up in the city of Compton, right? But it wasn't until I kind of started venturing a little bit outside of Compton that I started realizing that sometimes people get asked whether or not they're Latina in not the most nicest way, right? For me, my first experience, my first exposure to the not being Latina enough was actually a family member. This is where I want to have that conversation, right? Sometimes we're not trying to make you feel bad. Sometimes we are just trying to understand our own insecurities, and by accident, right, we end up introducing an insecurity to someone else. And I feel like that's what happened to me. I actually had a very close family member. I was out with her dad and her, and you know, I at the time wanted to do everything Latino. You know, in my school, it was very, very big. I did folclorico growing up. I did, you know, anything that would be within my culture. Hispanic Heritage Month, I always played a part in it in my school, things like that, right? I was always up there. I was always a big voice in my school. Elementary, middle school, high school, I was always a big advocate for Latinos. And you know, when I went to her house, she grew up in a not so very Latin neighborhood, honestly. We were talking about that, and I was telling her that, yeah, we need to make sure that we're a voice for Latinos. It doesn't matter our age. We want to make sure that, you know, people know that we're here. And she said, you know, yeah, it's easier for you because you get to relate to people. And, you know, you get to actually get the better side of it because you're really light skinned, where I am a little bit more on a dark tone. So I get called out too much about it. I've actually never been confused of, you know, not being Latina. You know, sometimes I've actually been confused for a Russian or Lebanese or, you know, something like that. I've never had anybody think that I was Caucasian. At least, you know, obviously
Yeah.
people don't go up to someone and say, hey, I think you're Caucasian, right? I don't think that that's the conversation. But and everybody who I've talked to, all the staff that I ever talked to, they always knew that I was something other than Caucasian, maybe Latina, like I said, maybe Lebanese, anything like that, but never Caucasian. So when she said that to me, I really started to grow that insecurity. I said, you know, well, you know, the beautiful women from my culture, most of the time they are a little bit more on a darker skin tone, but I'm really, really pale. I'm really white. I don't tan. Right. So that's where my insecurity started. I started trying to tan in the most unhealthiest way ever. I tried to do that and I wouldn't. I'd just get super red and then peel and then I'd be back to my pale color again. And that really started something for me. And I knew that that's not what she was intending, but she had her own insecurities that she then portrayed onto me. And I created insecurity out of that. And I don't think that that was the whole point. I feel like, you know, having the conversation of if you have Latin blood in your blood, you're Latino. Right. And that's something that I portray into my kids as well. I don't care that, you know, for me, my parents were both born out of the US. My dad was born in Mexico, my mom was born in Guatemala, and I was born here in the US. For my kids, both of their parents, myself and my husband, were born in the US. So I want to make sure that they have no way of saying later on that they're not Latinos. Right. And we kind of go on to that. And I think it's something really funny about that too. But what about you, Maggie? What do you know, have you experienced anything? I know that you were saying about you being called a no sabo kid, but I think a lot of people don't speak Spanish that are Latinos.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I would be called a no sabuke by everyone, right? But I do understand what people are saying. It's just that I can't really speak it. And when I worked in retail, I was just thinking about this. I just remembered because Black Friday is coming up. But when I worked in retail, um, there is so many, people that speak only Spanish, and they were asking me for things, and I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry because I can't say it, so I'm gonna have to say it like, oh, I'm not Hispanic. I'm sorry. But they're
What?
like, you you look Hispanic though. Like, I'm sorry. I can't because I don't want to be called like a nosal
Yeah.
or want them to look at me because I can't really, move my mouth. If you ever see me talk, you see that I move my mouth a lot, right? And there was this one time, and I took it as a joke, right? I think I was telling you the other day. I have
Mm.
Reliago. I got it because, I get stressed out a lot. Some people have eczema. I have Reliago. It's just like, dead pigment skin on your face that changes colors. Um, so in middle school, when it was starting to be more noticeable, someone told me, "You're lucky because you look," I forgot how he worded it. "You're lucky because you look Hispanic, but you can pass off as white because you're really Iago. I didn't really understand it, but I knew it was a joke. So I didn't really take it to heart. I was like, whatever. Okay, what does that even mean? You know? And also, when you told me that you were trying to tan, I wish I could tan. I couldn't tan. I couldn't tan because then it will be noticeable. But I would love to have that, you know, caramel skin, I guess you can
Right?
say.
That
A
beautiful,
caramel
yeah,
skin. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I don't know how people would want to be like pale. I don't want to be
right.
pale. I wish I could. I kind of look dark right now because summer just ended, but I'm usually very pale
Well, I
just
live in
because I
Michigan,
can't really
so
tan.
we barely get sun
Yeah.
out here.
Yeah, but for me, like, I guess you can say not knowing enough Spanish can really damage someone's self-esteem to the point that they don't even want to speak it. And once I had my daughter, I try to speak even more. I even downloaded an app that you can learn Spanish off of, right? Because I want her to grow up with Spanish. I don't want my heritage to die. I want,
Oh
you
no.
know, just because we're born in the United States doesn't mean that, we're gonna forget our culture. I'm not gonna do that. I want my daughter to know like where her roots are, you know?
Right. Yeah, no. And you know what? Kudos to you because our parents, right? It's kind of hard to say my parents, but our
Yeah.
parents, right? It's a huge Latino thing. I don't know why we do that, but our parents didn't really force you to learn Spanish that much for us. And people need to understand why. For us, my parents literally only taught us Spanish because it was the only thing that they knew. But then for you, it was a little bit more on a okay side because by then our parents already knew a lot more English too, and they were able to understand you. As long as you were able to understand each other, we were good, right? But I
Totally.
give you kudos because you yourself, you're at a point in your life where we are realizing we want to make sure that we keep our culture. We want to make sure that we keep our heritage and that we give that as an inheritance to our kids as well. You're going the extra mile to be able to learn it yourself and make sure that your daughter is learning that as well. Me too. My kids, I speak to my kids in Spanish all the time. Right now, it's a little bit hard because we are homeschooling my son. So obviously, with homeschool, it's a lot more English than anything. And then I caught it because the other day I tried to say something to him in Spanish, and he said, "Huh?" And I was like, what do you mean, ha? Like, what do you mean, ha? He's like, I don't understand you. And I'm like, well, I caught myself again. So again, between myself and my husband, we're making sure that our kids are gonna understand Spanish. My daughter knows a lot more Spanish right now than my son, even though she's younger, but it's because my son's in homeschooling, which is fine. My son, and this is another thing too that I have seen a lot in our community that kind of, takes us a step back. But as long as you are willing to do the extra mile and get it done, my son had a really bad speech delay at first. They thought that he was autistic. We ran a bunch of tests, all these different things. Turns out nothing was wrong with him. He's just a little bit speech delayed, and we can just work on it, right? So we were working extra hard with him to be able to learn all that, and we focus severely. I talked to his speech therapist, and I said, hey, I want to make sure my son knows Spanish as well. And she said, it's up to you what you want to do. However, in my opinion, I would make sure that he hones one language in. And once that is done, then introduce the other language and just make sure that you do that while he's still young. He's 5 years old and he's bilingual right now, which is amazing, right? He talks to his Spanish, he talks Spanish to his grandma, stuff like that. But he does need a little bit more work. And I love to see that in the community a lot more, especially when, you didn't really, you understand Spanish, you just aren't able to speak it as much. And it's nothing to do with your understanding of it. It has to do with you know what you have going on specifically, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and honestly, I always tell this, but like I stopped saying it. When growing up, I only spoke Spanish. When I was little, I only spoke Spanish. But once I got into, school, first grade, preschool, I had to speak English at school, but at home I was speaking Spanish. But I remember something happening. I think your guys' principal, like Marco's principal, from whatever school he was in, middle school or high school, he told my mom that she was a bad mom because you know how how Marcos was behaving and she doesn't know English. So that's when she started trying to learn more English. And so I had to speak English to her, and my dad at that time wasn't really home because he was working a lot.
Right.
So it's really understandable, but I guess you can say I mainly grew up speaking English, I guess, because I was with my mom all the time.
Right. Yeah, I just think that there's that defining moment in your life. I feel like a lot of people have this, that you start to question yourself whether or not you are Latina or Latino enough, right? But just this just goes to say to everyone whatsoever, if you're listening to this podcast, if you have any type of Latino blood within you, if it runs, I don't care if it's 3, 4, 5 generations ago or anything like that, welcome to the community. You're a part of the community. Don't worry about having to be Latino enough. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Make sure, obviously, that our culture is being protected at all times. Obviously, it's up to us, the new generation that's upbringing, right, our own kids. It's up to us to make sure that it doesn't die down. And other than that, I mean, if you consider yourself Latino, thank you. Welcome to the family, welcome to the community. This is all yours. And just try and make sure to not portray your own insecurities to someone else, right? Like like I
Yeah.
said, I don't think that my relative at all wanted to portray her insecurities to me. However, that's what ended up happening. And it had nothing to do with it. I mean, I speak Spanish. I know a lot about my culture. I know a lot about our heritage. I know a lot about our family's legacy, right? And I go outside of my way to make sure that our community does too. So I think, and I consider myself Latina enough, and I'm Latina enough for myself. I'm Latina enough for my community. I'm Latina enough for my children, and that's good with me. And as long as you have that with you, I mean, I hope that this speaks to you and you're able to take this and run with it. Honestly, I don't want to have an identity crisis. I hope nobody has an identity crisis. You're Latina enough.
So I'm so glad that you said that because my husband actually, he's from New Mexico. So he really does get, I wouldn't say bullied, but he made fun of a lot. People, especially his friends, they're always telling him, "Well, you're not Hispanic. You're from New Mexico. That's like the fake Mexico." And he's like, "No, I am Mexican. I'm just the cowboy Mexican. I am." And he struggles a lot too. Like he's even doing the app as well, trying to learn more Spanish because he wants Bea, like my daughter, Bealine, that's her name, um, to know Spanish. She wants her growing up in like speaking Spanish. He loves whenever my mom talks to her in Spanish, and he's trying to make his mom speak Spanish to her as well. But
Okay.
yeah, he didn't really grow up speaking Spanish, but he would love to like have our daughter speak Spanish though. He wants the
Yeah.
culture to stay here, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, he is like, I feel like you and him are the definition of, well, I don't want to call you a no sabo kid, but you guys were called that a lot. But you guys try a lot harder than other people to make sure that your culture is being kept alive, right? And that right there is
Oh
it.
yeah.
That's it. If you do that, you're Latino. Your kids are Latino. That's it. And kind of talking about our spouses. I mean, we as a community, we have a lot to deal with. Unfortunately, right? We have a generational trauma. We have just all these different, like, we get called out for not being Latino enough from people who are from Mexico, or people who are here and have been here for a long time too. And just to kind of add it, then we have to we have that other trauma that we talked about the other day, right? Not being loved enough by our parents, or not being, receiving affection from it. And I feel like our husbands are just the definition of what we needed in order to be where we're at right now, right? Career wise, emotionally wise, everything, including for me myself. My husband was one of the persons that helped me heal from that insecurity of not being Latina enough. I know, like, that was his type of person. That was the kind of person that he wanted to end up with. That's something that we had a conversation on. And when we had that conversation, I told him, I know that you are looking for a Latina to grow your family with and things, but I feel like I'm not there. I feel like I'm not enough for you. And he pointed out a lot of things that helped me just heal so much. And he did a lot for me, honestly. I appreciate my husband so much. And I know that we said before that we were going to talk about this, and I feel like this is a perfect time to talk about our spouses. I know, Maggie, you have a lot to say about yours, but for me, I grew up with quite a bit of a story behind me that it's not something that I talk about, but one of the things that I had and I didn't notice until I moved in with my husband was that I had a lot of trauma with sleeping. I never really slept a whole night. I didn't know what that felt like. I always woke up in the middle of the night. And another thing was that I had to be completely covered. And we lived in California, so it was hot, right? And especially at night, I had to be completely covered. My legs, my feet couldn't be sticking out of the bed or anything like that. And then the covers had to be all the way over my head. So I remember the first night that my husband and I slept at our apartment together. I did that. We said goodnight and everything. I turned around to my side and I covered myself, and he woke up in the middle of the night and said, like, where are you? Like, and then he's like, are you under the cover? And I was like, yeah, this is how I sleep. Like, I don't, I'm not really comfortable not sleeping like this. And he's like, it's hot. Why are you doing that? My husband's the type that he barely even has covers on or anything like that. He'll sleep with nothing on. And, I'm right there completely covered, especially in the middle of
Yeah.
summer. Right.
I don't
And
know how men can do it.
right. I don't know either. But he told me, he said, you don't have to do that. Like, are you scared? What's going on? And I had to sit up and talk to him a little bit and say, like, yeah, I think I am. He's like, well, what's going to happen to you if I'm here? Right. And little by little, as time passed by, I was able to take off the covers from my head. And then I was able to stick out my leg. And then I was able to sleep through a whole night. I mean, it took a while, but my husband really did provide what I needed, which was security, honestly. And I completely just thank him for that, because he did get me from a very, very different spot in my life and help me grow. It's not his responsibility, because one has to love themselves first before that. But he did definitely help me get to where I needed to be the mom that I want to be the Latina for my community that I want to be, and to be that legacy builder for my family too that I want to be as well. But what about you?
Honestly, I had a similar experience as well when Isaac moved in. I had to be completely covered, not my face, but my whole body up to my neck, right? And him now not sleeping with covers. He basically doesn't even sleep with covers. Even when it's cold, he'll probably have one cover and that's it. But I have to have like at least three so I can feel like that weight on me. But yeah, I have to have completely everything covered. And he knows that I get scared and he knows that I need him with me when I go to sleep. So that's why he doesn't really go out too late at night because I'll be waiting for him. I'll be waiting for him. One time he was out probably late with his friends and it was the first time he moved in. I was like, I'm waiting for you to come home. Like, I want to go to sleep. Like, where are you? What are you doing? We'll go to sleep. I can't. I need you beside me. You gotta protect me while I sleep, you know? So I remember just like multiple times waking up in the middle of the night and then I'll tap on him because I need to use the restroom. Babe, I need to use the restroom, but I'm scared. Come with me. And he's like, okay, okay, let's go. He'll just wait right there next to the door, and then he'll hold my hand so we can go back to sleep. I'm like, okay, thank you so much. When I first did that, and it took me a while, I almost, you know, pissed on the bed because I didn't want to wake up and wake him up. But I'm so glad that he did because he didn't really mind it because he wants me to feel secure. He didn't, he, even when I told him the next day and I apologized, I'm sorry that I keep waking you up in the middle of the night. I'm just scared. He was like, you don't have to apologize. I understand. I get scared too, but just know that I'm here for you. I'm right here and you're protector. I'm like, okay. You are my protector. Thank you. I thought he was gonna be mad, but he wasn't. He was just happy to do that for me.
Yeah,
I'm glad I have someone like that.
yeah, absolutely. I think we got pretty lucky with the persons that we ended up with. All of us, honestly. I feel like that's even my brother, I feel like the person that he ended up with was a person that he needed to get him to where he needs to be. And then you two, you guys are working on it right now to get to where you guys need to be. And my husband, I mean, um and I think I talked about this before, but I had previous relationships where, I never introduced him to my dad because I wasn't going to introduce anybody until I was completely sure that they were going to be for me and that I was going to start a family with them, because that's something that my dad imposed on us, right? That once you introduce that person, that's it. There's no going back. Like, you guys got to make it done. You got to get it done. You got to, have all that stuff. And it kind of reminds me of the story of when my dad and my husband met. I did tell a little bit about this story before, but my dad, since I was growing up, he was always like, I don't want to meet the person that you're with. I don't want to meet any boyfriends. I don't want to meet anyone until the day before you're going to move out. And that happened, right? I did it exactly how he taught me, exactly what he told me, exactly what he was telling me the whole time that I was growing up. That's how I did it. We had already gotten our keys for our apartment. And I called a meeting for him and my mom so that they can meet him. And I didn't even tell my mom either. Which was separate, right? That I shouldn't have done, but I didn't tell them anything. But I was completely sure that this is the person that I want to introduce to my parents. I mean, this is the person, I had relationships before that lasted 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it did. And I was actually with him for 6 months before I moved in. And I know that it's scary, but I knew exactly like his background, everything, his personality. There was little kind of tiny things that I knew that my dad wasn't gonna like, tattoos, stuff like that. But I was like, he has enough where they can definitely overlook that and accept him, right? And the day that my dad met him was the day that I was completely sure. If I had any little doubt, which I really didn't, but any little doubt was just killed off of me because my dad was a very scary person. All of my cousins growing up were always scared of him. He was the most respected uncle, to be honest. And no offense, but he really was the most respected uncle.
Oh, yeah.
No one would joke around with him unless you had that relationship with him, right? He was very, very well respected in our family. And my husband obviously didn't really understand that. Obviously, I tried to warn him about it. I tried to tell him, and my dad he wasn't tall or anything, but you can see just with his image, right, that he was somebody. And my husband was already nervous about the fact because he wanted to meet my parents before, but I told him, no, 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 you can't, we have to do it this way because this is how my dad wanted to. And he's like, I don't know, I don't think that's right, all these different things, right? But the day that I sat with my dad, my dad came late, which I knew that he was going to do that. But whatever, we ended up sitting down with him on the couch. And so we told my dad that we were going to move in, and I introduced him. We told him a little bit about my husband's backstory. He grew up in Santa Paula. He grew up in an agricultural environment. His parents worked on the fields a lot, and that's where he grew up. He grew up in the fields, and with a very, very Hispanic background, just like us, right? And my dad told him, you're not going to take her. He said, you're not going to take her. This is my dad. Literally, he said in Spanish. He completely ignored me, like completely turned away from me, and was talking just to my husband, my boyfriend at that time, but now my husband. He said, that's not how we're going to do things. This is how we're going to do it. You're going to leave her here. We're going to plan the wedding. You guys can get married in about 3 months, and then the day of the wedding you can take her afterwards. And at that time, I was like, all right, that's it. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. Like, I was like, this is it. And my husband, I didn't think, that he was going to do that because I've never seen anyone talk to my dad this way. And this was like a huge turning point in our whole entire family. No one's ever talked to my dad that way or anything like that. But my husband said, with all due respect, obviously in Spanish, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm here to let you know in a nice way that we're leaving. But if you don't approve from it, then we're going to do it anyways because I love her and I'm ready to move in with her. And we're going to decide when we're going to get married. We want to make sure that we start our life first, right? We already decided what we wanted to do no matter what. We're taking her. So I'm either going to take her today with or without your blessing. And we much rather have your blessing in order to do this and do it the right way and not stay in and, not begin in a bad way. And my dad turned away from my husband and only spoke to me and didn't speak to him anymore. And he said, is this really what you want to do? He asked me, why do you want to leave? And I told him I knew that I was going to leave at some point. I was already in my 20s. I already had my career. I already graduated from college. I did what I had to do, and I felt like I did it in the right way. And I said, it's not that I want to leave. If it was up to me, I'd stay with you guys for the rest of my life, but I have to build my life. I have to build my own family as well. And you taught me that from the very beginning. I would love to stay with you guys forever, but I know that I have to, this is what you guys prepared me for. So my dad just agreed to disagree, and we went on with that. And my dad had a lot of respect for my husband, and it was a conversation that we had a lot afterwards because I'm telling you, no one ever spoke to my dad like that. no, if my dad said something and he said this is how we're gonna do it, you know how he said así lo vamos a hacer, like that was it. You have to listen and you have to make sure that we do exactly how he did it. And my husband stood up for us and stood up for our relationship, and that's where everything really started for me and my husband. And you know what? Afterwards, when I talked to my husband after my parent, you know, when my parents weren't there, I told him, I said, I can't believe you did that. He's like, wasn't that what you like? Wasn't that what we talked about? Like, wasn't that what like we agreed on? And I'm like, I know, but you told my dad. He's like, should I be scared? I'm like, I think I'm scared, you know. But I think that that's who my dad got to meet, and I'm super proud that my dad was able to meet him before he passed. And I definitely wish, and the way that I envision it with Isaac, your husband, I feel like it would have gone something similar. I feel like my dad would have approved him. Obviously, like I said, no one was going to be perfect for my dad. No one, because it's his daughters. But I feel like he would have definitely came to love Isaac, and I feel like he would have accepted him, and he would have had an amazing relationship with him. To be honest,
Oh, yeah, I wish my dad would have met him so many
it's a hard
times.
topic.
Uh, it is a hard topic. I wished he also wished that he had met my dad as well. He's always hearing stories about him. He's like, that's a dad. I wish, you know, I could have met him. I could have talked to him. There's probably gonna be a late language barrier, but I was gonna pull out my phone and put Google Translate or something. I was like, okay,
Oh,
okay, okay.
yeah.
But yeah, like some of you guys know, I started dating Isaac when my dad like a couple of months when my dad passed away. Um, but the one thing that like I really did appreciate him doing, because we would always go out every Saturday, and Saturdays are the days that I went to go see my dad. And I had a curfew. I know I was like 19, 18 years old and I had a curfew. But yeah, I had a curfew, so we only had a limited time. But I wanted to be with my dad. I wanted to at least be next to him. And one thing that I think that not a lot of people would do, he's super scared of the cemetery because he just gets, he's a vibe type of person, so he gets really scared.
No,
I
yeah,
wouldn't say scared. I don't know. I don't know how
uncomfortable.
to say it. I'm just yeah, uncomfortable. Okay. Yeah. He gets really uncomfortable in cemeteries, but he would pick me up from the house. He'll drive me to the cemetery. We'll be there for like 2, 3 hours, and I never really expected him to ever talk to my dad, but he would sit there next to me. He'll buy food. He'll get something for my dad as well, and he'll just be there with me, just talking with my dad, and he'll always be like, "Oh, give me a minute with your dad," and I can still hear him. He's like, "Thank you so much for like raising her. She's such a beautiful and strong daughter, and like, thank you so much." He would always say thank you, and he always apologized for like being with me when he's not here. But that's something that I think not a lot of people would do, especially like a couple months in from only talking. It was only the talking stage. It wasn't really going out at that point. So it was only a talking stage. So I feel like not a lot of people would do that.
But I think that Isaac was really, really perfect for you because, and it might have been one of those things because for myself and my husband, one of the things that got us really close is that we had the same upbringing, literally the same upbringing. Like, there's a lot of things that we went through with our parents that a lot of people wouldn't understand. We had a broken home at some point, but our parents, reconciled. They fixed things and stuff like that. We didn't always have the picture perfect type of upbringing, right? And my husband had the same thing, literally. So that's one of the things that brought us together. And for you and Isaac, you guys have something very, very similar too. I mean, literally, I felt like that was the person that you needed to be with to in order to continue the healing process in order to do that, right?
And we were talking about it earlier as well, that we believe that our partners are perfect for each other, for us. We're basically like soulmates because we both have the same upbringing. Me and Rachel were talking about it a little bit earlier as well, talking about how our partners are really our soulmates. Because my husband, he actually his dad did pass away in a very important part of his phase of life. So when
In
my
his
dad passed
upbringing.
away, when in his upbringing. So when my dad passed away, he was really there for me. He understood everything. He
Right.
tried to be there for me, and well, I couldn't ask for anyone better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, it's something that I don't wish on anyone. If you have ever felt the same pain that we have felt, the pain of losing a parent, it's different. I've had family members pass away, I had friends pass away that really, really hurt me, that, you know,
Oh yeah,
changed my way of bringing, but my dad passing away, I mean, no one can really understand that unless they've gone through the same or something similar, right? And I feel like you needed him in that moment because he had already gone through that as well, and I feel like that really helped you out too, and I saw that a lot, and that's where I got my respect for Isaac a lot. When I found that out about him, I'm like, oh my God, like this is literally just God playing his cards right now, and he was brought into your life. you know I mean, we couldn't help you because we were going through it at the same time as you were, right? I'd love it
oh
when
yeah,
I've already gone through something in life and I've already experienced that, and then I'm able to, talk to you about that. But I wasn't able to talk to you about that because I was literally going through it with you at that time. And I feel like he just came at a perfect time for us. And
yeah. And that's why I always say like things happen for a reason.
oh yeah,
Cause I don't know why, but when my dad passed away, I was so heartbroken trying to be tough for my mom because everyone kept
yeah,
on telling me I have to be tough for her. But the only person that popped in my head was Isaac. I'm like, I
right,
gotta talk to Isaac. And I haven't even spoken to Isaac since, okay, I met him sophomore year, junior year, right? So that was 3, 4 years bef before my dad passing. I didn't even t talk to him. I didn't speak to him. I
right,
just remembered him in my head, and we always planned to hang out as friends. But, me being a scary cat, me thinking that my dad would catch me, I never agreed to. But for some reason, like, I need to text Isaac. I don't know why. I just texted him. I was like, hey, how are you? Do you want to get coffee? And that's it. And that's how everything started. I don't know why he was the first person in my head, but he was.
right. And I feel like this is a great, we gotta end it because I don't want Mimi to stay there too long too. But I feel like this is a good stopping point right here because I wish we can go into more detail about our spouses and about our upbringing sometimes and stuff like that. But out of respect, sometimes we just have to say what we can, and the rest is a part of our experiences and a part of why we're doing this, right? But I think that yeah, our spouses were put into our life when we needed them the most and placed perfectly. And for that, we got our perfect kids as well, right? Our beautiful little miracles. All of us, you, myself, and my brother too, all of his beautiful kids too. And I just hope that I get to see this family grow more and more. I'm done, but I hope that, whoever wants more kids, they can go ahead and get whatever, how many kids that you guys want. But other than that, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I feel like it's a really big one. I feel like it's a defining one, and it's one of those episodes that it's why we're doing what it is that we're doing, right? We're doing this podcast because we want to relate to our community. We want to start having those conversations, and we want to be able to make you guys understand that you're not alone, right? Our generation is a lot different than the generations before us. And sometimes they want to give their opinions, things like that, but no one understands us more than ourselves, right? And I'm talking millennials, I'm talking about Gen Z, whatever it is that it's after that, Gen X, whatever, right? I don't even I've gotten lost in those generations already. All of us right now that are
Yeah.
adults, right? All of our first generation Hispanic American, or whatever it is that you were put here to, however it is that you want to consider yourself, this conversation is for you, and I would love to see more of that conversation. So make sure you guys are commenting, sending us messages. um you know um our email is cafeconcultura2024@gmail.com if you guys want to reach out to us and give us some ideas and maybe even share your experiences and your stories. Please do so. We would love to hear from you guys more, and I hope that you guys enjoy this episode, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Yes, if you do email us about your story, just let us know if you want us to share. Obviously, we won't share your handle or your name, but we will show your story and we just say, anonymous, But thank you so much for hearing our story, and I hope that we can relate a lot to you guys. Have a nice day. Have a nice morning or whenever you're hearing this, right? Enjoy your cafecito and thank you so much for joining in Chisme. Bye, mi gente. Love you.